something like that. And I guess Adam wanted to put himself around the shooting I did I wouldn't feel no way if Adam actually didn't do that. I don't know who this person is, but Hot Topics is pertaining to some guys who were regular, who wasn't gang-bangish, who didn't.
This might be one of the most shocking and layered developments to hit hip-hop media in recent memory, and that assessment carries significant weight when you consider the long history of chaotic scandals, legal troubles, and dramatic falls from grace that have defined the culture and the platforms dedicated to covering it over the years. We're talking about a prominent co-host on the No Jumper podcast, a man who sat at that iconic table week after week delivering sharp jokes, engaging in deep dives into street politics, building meaningful connections with listeners, and steadily cultivating a dedicated and growing fan base, only to find himself suddenly locked up by the LAPD, facing a very serious felony murder charge that has sent ripples throughout the entire industry. But the layers of complexity and intrigue do not stop there at all. Adam22, the founder, the public face, and the central driving force behind the entire No Jumper empire, appears to have inadvertently, or perhaps in some calculated manner, contributed to connecting some of the critical dots for authorities regarding his own longtime collaborator and friend. And adding even more intrigue, mystery, and psychological depth to the entire situation, Aunt Hefe, whose real government name is Morris Shellman, shared a deeply cryptic and ominous video on Instagram right before his arrest that seemed to foreshadow the massive storm heading directly his way, essentially putting the world on notice in a subtle yet profoundly telling manner that many are now revisiting with fresh eyes. So prepare yourself for an extremely thorough, detailed, and expanded breakdown as we explore the full arc of his rise from the unforgiving streets, the complex background that shaped his entire worldview and decision-making, the heavy murder charge that has completely upended everything he was building, and the specific ways in which Adam22's public comments may have added substantial fuel to the fire, or at least powerfully shaped both public perception and possibly even official narratives in the process. This story touches on themes of redemption, the inescapable pull of past lives, media responsibility, and the harsh realities of street culture intersecting with modern digital fame in ways that feel both timeless and uniquely contemporary. To truly appreciate the immense gravity and emotional weight of what has unfolded in such a short span of time, it is absolutely essential to go back and understand who Aunt Hefe truly is, at his core, and trace the long, winding path that ultimately led him to this current moment of crisis and uncertainty. Born as Morris Shellman and hailing directly from the heart of South Central Los Angeles, he grew up in an environment that was far removed from any notions of gentrification, softened urban renewal, or middle-class comforts that have slowly transformed parts of the city in recent decades. This was the raw, unforgiving, and often brutal South Central, where survival frequently dictated making incredibly tough choices at a very young and impressionable age. Choices that carried the potential to lock in one's life trajectory for decades to come, with little room for error or second chances. On the No Jumper podcast, over the course of many episodes, Hefe had been remarkably candid, open, and introspective about his early years, sharing intimate details that now carry an almost eerie prophetic weight in light of his current legal troubles and the serious accusations hanging over him. He described in vivid terms starting to associate with individuals who were significantly older, often 5 to 10 years his senior, when he was still just a kid barely navigating middle school or early high school years. These were not casual friendships formed with peers his own age, but deep connections to established OGs already heavily entrenched in street life, gang politics, and criminal enterprises that operated with their own codes and hierarchies. While many of his contemporaries from the same neighborhoods began exploring gang-related activities or risky behaviors, only years later during their mid to late teens, Hefe found himself immersed, much earlier, navigating a dangerous world filled with risks, pressures, and expectations that most teenagers never have to encounter or even comprehend. His adolescence became something of a revolving door involving multiple stints in juvenile facilities, with repeated incidents involving firearms, stolen vehicles, active participation in gang-banging, and other survival-driven activities that quickly built up a substantial and concerning record in a neighborhood where such patterns were tragically common, normalized by the environment, and often passed down through generations. This background was never presented during his podcast appearances as mere street bravado, empty entertainment for clout chasing, or exaggerated tales designed to boost his image in the eyes of hip-hop audiences. Instead, Hefe spoke from a place of genuine lived experience, detailing a harsh reality that involved very real and lasting consequences. constant brushes with danger, and a daily dance with violence and the law that shaped his identity in profound ways. The most significant and defining chapter in that early history occurred well before his eventual media breakthrough and rise to visibility, when he served a lengthy 8-year sentence in federal prison, stemming from a major RICO case that targeted organized criminal networks. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act remains one of the most powerful and feared tools in the federal prosecutor's arsenal. Typically reserved not for isolated low-level offenders engaging in petty crime, but for those authorities believe are meaningfully part of broader structured criminal enterprises with leadership roles or significant involvement. Surviving that kind of extended time behind bars, especially in the federal system with its unique pressures and isolation from family, is no small feat by any measure. And upon his eventual release, Hefe publicly reflected on what he described as a genuine personal transformation that had taken root during his incarceration. He discussed at length gaining a much deeper appreciation for the value of life itself, developing new interests in travel to broaden his horizons, exploring different cultures, and adopting broader perspectives that gradually shifted his priorities away from the streets and toward more constructive, legitimate paths forward. It was the kind of compelling redemption narrative that has always resonated deeply within hip-hop storytelling traditions and urban communities more broadly. A man who paid what seemed like a heavy debt to society through years of imprisonment and emerged with a renewed determination to build something positive, meaningful, and lasting for himself, and potentially inspire others facing similar struggles. For a sustained period after his release, that story appeared authentic, inspiring, and filled with real momentum, as he successfully transitioned into the media world with impressive speed and growing influence that many observers found admirable and worthy of support. Adam22, whose real name is Adam Grayson, played an undeniably pivotal and hands-on role in this particular chapter of Hefe's life by personally recruiting him to join the No Jumper team around May of 2025. A decision that at the time seemed mutually beneficial and strategically sound for everyone involved. No Jumper had established itself over more than a decade as a true powerhouse and influential force in hip-hop media circles, known far and wide for its unfiltered, no-holds-barred interviews, its knack for breaking new artists before they achieved mainstream success, and its willingness to engage with controversial figures from both the music scene and the streets. Individuals that more polished, mainstream corporate outlets would typically avoid entirely due to risk or reputational concerns. The brand had always thrived on an ethos of raw authenticity, unscripted conversation, and a commitment to platforms' voices that reflected the unvarnished realities of urban life. And Hefe brought an irreplaceable, organic element to the table that no amount of scripting or production value could ever manufacture on its own. First-hand street credibility that was backed by his documented history, combined with an articulate delivery style, natural charisma, and the ability to connect emotionally with listeners from similar backgrounds, or those simply fascinated by the culture. He quickly became a fixture and regular presence alongside other hosts like Brick Baby, Lush One, and various rotating panelists. With his individual segments and sharp takes generating strong clip views, viral shares, and engagement across YouTube, Instagram, X, and other platforms. Fans and subscribers appreciated his insightful commentary on evolving street codes, shifting cultural dynamics in Los Angeles, personal growth stories, and the intersections between hip-hop and real-life survival, all while he continued independently releasing music projects that stayed unflinchingly true to his South Central roots, experiences, and worldview. By the time early 2026 rolled around, he had effectively solidified his position as one of the platform's most visible, recognizable, and discussed personalities, representing what looked on the surface like a compelling and successful arc from lengthy federal incarceration to a rising star in media and entertainment. It genuinely appeared to many as a genuine success story in a notoriously difficult space, where such transformations are frequently celebrated in public, but rarely sustained for long without encountering significant internal or external challenges. Yet, beneath the polished surface of this public ascent and growing popularity, deeper tensions and unresolved elements from Hefe's past were evidently still simmering, bubbling under the radar in ways that the cameras in weekly episodes never fully captured or addressed. The day immediately before his arrest on May 19, 2026, Hefe made the decision to post an Instagram video that stood out dramatically for its somber foreboding and introspective tone, diverging sharply from his usual content. It was not promotional material for new music, not a recycled podcast clip, and not a casual lifestyle update designed to engage fans. Instead, it was a reflective, almost confessional message touching on themes of the devil working overtime in his life, and the personal necessity of weathering an impending and heavy storm that seemed to be approaching. He appeared visibly to be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually steeling himself for some form of major hardship or confrontation, speaking in vague but loaded terms that suggested a level of private awareness about looming difficulties, without providing any specific names, dates, or concrete details that could be easily interpreted at the time. This particular clip took on profound, almost haunting significance once the arrest news broke and spread rapidly through media channels and social platforms. During the No Jumper episode that was being recorded on that very same day, when Jefe unexpectedly failed to appear at the studio, the co-hosts initially offered light speculation that it might simply be something minor or logistical that would be explained later. However, as fragmented updates began filtering in regarding an arrest executed by the Specialized Robbery Homicide Division, confirmation of a felony murder charge, and the imposition of a staggering $1 million bail amount, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted in real time from casual banter to visible shock, concern, and discomfort. Adam22 and the rest of the panel reacted organically on camera, with Adam later offering a pointed commentary on the Instagram video, interpreting it as aligning closely with the mindset of someone actively preparing for an intense legal battle or serious personal reckoning. The precise timing of that pre-arrest post, mere hours or a day before LAPD moved in with force, has since fueled endless online speculation, debates, and psychological analyses about exactly how much advanced knowledge Jefe may have possessed, whether he had been tipped off through informal channels, and to what extent he sensed the investigative net steadily tightening around him over weeks or even months prior. The arrest operation itself carried all the hallmarks of a high-priority, well-prepared law enforcement action that underscored the undeniable severity and seriousness of the accusations being leveled. Handled directly by the LAPD's elite robbery homicide division, this was far from an ordinary routine police stop or a simple warrant service that might occur in less complex cases. Instead, it represented a targeted, calculated operation conducted by investigators who specialize exclusively in the city's most intricate, high-stakes, and often headline-grabbing criminal matters involving violence, organized activity, and significant community impact. These units are known for building their cases with exceptional meticulousness, relying on comprehensive timelines, multiple witness statements, extensive surveillance footage reviews, cell phone data analysis, forensic evidence collection, and confidential informant tips before deciding to execute an arrest. The specific charge of felony murder in the state of California carries an immense legal and societal weight because it allows prosecutors to hold individuals accountable for a death that occurs during the commission or attempted commission of another serious underlying felony, such as robbery, burglary, or other violent crimes, even in situations where the accused person did not personally pull the trigger or directly cause the fatal injury. This legal doctrine casts an intentionally broad net designed to deter group criminal enterprises, and the decision by authorities to pursue it against Jefe, especially when paired with the unusually high bail amount set by the court, sends a clear signal that law enforcement and the district attorney's office view him as both a credible potential flight risk and a significant ongoing concern for community safety. As of the most recent publicly available updates, he remains detained at an LAPD facility, while the broader investigation moves forward at its own pace. Crucially, many key details about the alleged underlying incident, including the identity of the victim, the exact motive, the location, and Jefe's precise alleged role, have not yet been fully disclosed to the public, which remains standard protocol during active investigations, but inevitably leaves substantial room for media speculation, amateur sleuthing, and divided opinions across comment sections and forums. Adding even greater depth, nuance, and retrospective scrutiny to the overall narrative, Jefe's own past admissions, stories, and reflections shared openly across multiple No Jumper episodes now invite much closer examination and reinterpretation under an entirely different and more critical lens shaped by his arrest. He had always been notably transparent, almost disarmingly so, about key elements of his history, including running with older and more established gang members from a young age, enduring repeated involvement with the juvenile justice system, and eventually serving that substantial stretch of federal time on the RICO matter. While this level of openness and vulnerability initially served as a major strength that built his personal appeal, fostered authenticity in the eyes of fans, and differentiated him from more polished or performative media figures, it has also inadvertently created an extensive and easily accessible public record that could potentially function as character evidence, contextual background, or even indirect corroboration in any future legal proceedings. His detailed discussions of street politics and hierarchies, past periods of relative disregard for certain moral or legal boundaries, and the gradual evolution toward a deeper respect for human life all exist permanently in archived episodes that have collectively amassed millions of views over time. Some legal observers and street-savvy commentators have pointed to this transparency as a modern form of inadvertent self-documentation, where words spoken for entertainment or connection purposes might later be referenced by investigators or prosecutors when constructing a behavioral profile or narrative arc for the case. The cryptic pre-arrest Instagram video only amplifies these ongoing questions questions about his internal mindset during the lead-up. Did he receive some form of prior indication or warning about active law enforcement interest in his activities? How long exactly had the psychological and emotional pressure been building before the cuffs were finally applied? These interconnected elements collectively paint a more complicated picture of a man who may have been attempting to straddle two very different worlds simultaneously. The emerging, reformed media personality seeking legitimacy, travel, and cultural growth on one side, and lingering personal or associational connections from his earlier life that perhaps refused to fully release their grip despite his public claims of change. The public reaction and handling of the situation by Adam22 himself has independently sparked its own intense wave of debate, analysis, and division across social media, hip-hop commentary channels, and online forums. Shortly after the arrest details became widely public, Adam moved quickly to provide a statement to TMZ, a choice that some insiders and critics immediately viewed as a strategic form of brand distancing or damage control rather than purely emotional support for a colleague. In the shared message, Adam described Hefe as a strong, valuable contributor to the podcast over roughly the past year, and expressed that, as far as he personally knew, the co-host was no longer deeply or actively involved in street activities, ultimately framing the entire situation as a major and unexpected shock to those closest to him. The specific phrasing choices, as far as I knew, and the emphasis on any more, have been parsed, dissected, and memed extensively in the days since, with many arguing that they subtly acknowledge Hefe's well-known history, while simultaneously emphasizing a perceived clean break from it. This approach could serve to protect the broader No Jumper brand and its remaining hosts from unwanted spillover scrutiny or legal association, all while confirming certain elements of the past to the general public in a controlled manner. On the podcast episode taped that day, Adam's relatively early speculation about the strong possibility of an arrest, even before many full details had emerged, and his confident interpretation of the Instagram clip as clear preparation for legal troubles suggested an underlying level of contextual understanding and street intuition that extended well beyond what a casual observer or distant fan might possess. Whether these various comments and actions ultimately represent careful self-preservation in a high-pressure moment, expressions of genuine disbelief and disappointment, or something that could inadvertently aid narrative building for authorities is a topic that continues to generate heated discussion. Some vocal critics within the culture have labeled aspects of the response as a form of soft snitching or self-serving clarification, while defenders maintain it was simply the straightforward, honest reaction of a busy entrepreneur and boss caught completely off guard by rapidly unfolding events involving someone he had trusted and elevated. Legally speaking, Hef now faces what appears to be an extremely challenging uphill battle that is characteristic of serious felony murder prosecutions in California, where the system treats such cases with exceptional gravity and resources. Convictions in these matters can and often do result in lengthy sentences ranging from a minimum of 25 years to life imprisonment, with various enhancements possible depending on aggravating factors such as prior serious convictions like the earlier RICO case, use of firearms, or other special circumstances that prosecutors might argue could elevate the penalty all the way to life without any possibility of parole. The involvement of the Robbery Homicide Division strongly implies the existence of a robust, multifaceted case file supported by substantial evidence, though the precise specifics regarding the alleged events, possibly connected to incidents occurring in South or Central Los Angeles areas sometime in the months leading into 2026, continue to remain tightly under wraps by investigators. This sudden development has effectively placed his entire media career on indefinite pause and halted his independent musical endeavors, closing what had only recently seemed like a genuinely promising and hard-earned second chapter in his life story. For the many fans who had invested emotionally in his narrative of personal growth, transformation, and redemption after federal prison, the sense of disappointment, betrayal, or sadness often feels deeply personal rather than abstract. It highlights in stark terms the profound difficulties and systemic obstacles involved in fully separating oneself from the environments, relationships, and survival mindsets that heavily shaped one's formative years. Even when outward success in media and entertainment appears to be flourishing, in many respects the entire saga functions as a broader cautionary tale about the long, persistent shadows cast by early street entanglements, the challenges of genuine reinvention under public scrutiny, and the ways in which past decisions can resurface with devastating force when least anticipated. Expanding further on the wider cultural, social, and industry implications, this unfolding story touches upon much larger and enduring themes within hip-hop media ecosystems, and the frequently blurred, complicated lines that exist between authentic entertainment, street credibility, personal responsibility, and real-world legal consequences that cannot always be managed or spun. Platforms similar to No Jumper have long derived significant value, audience engagement, and revenue from spotlighting and platforming voices that carry genuine, unfiltered street pedigrees and perspectives, offering offering listeners raw insights and stories that more conventional, corporate-controlled media outlets simply cannot or will not replicate without heavy filtering. However, when those same voices carry unresolved personal baggage, ongoing associations, or vulnerabilities that have not been fully addressed, the potential fallout can be swift, damaging, and far-reaching, not only for the individual directly involved, but for the entire supporting ecosystem, brand reputation, and other collaborators who suddenly find themselves answering uncomfortable questions. Hefe's notable transparency throughout his time on the show, while initially one of his greatest strengths in building rapport and subscriber loyalty, may now introduce added layers of complexity to any legal defense strategy by providing prosecutors with an abundance of readily available, on-the-record material that could be used to argue consistent patterns of behavior, associations, or mindset. Meanwhile, Adam22's somewhat precarious position as the primary architect and public face of the platform places him in a delicate balancing act, trying to demonstrate loyalty and support for a former collaborator while simultaneously needing to safeguard a business that has been built largely on controversial, boundary-pushing content that walks a fine line between compelling storytelling and potential liability. The internet's rapid, often merciless dissection of every single statement, old clip, timeline inconsistency, or social media post reflects how modern social media dynamics and algorithmic amplification transform what might once have been relatively contained personal legal crises into massive communal spectacles, where public opinions harden almost instantly. Narratives compete for dominance, and cancellation or redemption cycles play out in accelerated fashion. Further reflection on the deeply human and often tragic dimensions at the core of this case reveals a story that transcends simple headlines about crime and punishment. Here we have a man who managed to survive nearly a full decade inside the federal prison system, emerged with ambitious plans for cultural exploration, personal development, and legitimate career building, and successfully carved out a visible niche in a highly competitive and often skeptical media landscape, only for elements of his past or allegedly continued associations to resurface in the most destructive and public manner imaginable. The pre-arrest Instagram video remains a particularly poignant and revealing artifact in this regard. A solitary, vulnerable expression of internal conflict, fear, and resolve that was shared with the world, yet kept deliberately vague enough to avoid any direct or legally compromising confession. It humanizes an individual who is otherwise at risk of being reduced entirely to sensationalized news summaries, court documents, or online debates, reminding everyone involved that behind the podcast banter, streetwise commentary, and projected confidence lies a complex person who was likely grappling with powerful internal and external forces that extended well beyond simple individual willpower or choices. Whether true redemption and complete separation from the streets was fully achievable in his circumstances, whether the two identities of reformed media figure and street-connected individual coexisted uneasily in parallel, or whether external pressures simply proved too overwhelming, is a set of profound questions that only additional facts, court proceedings, and perhaps Hefe's own future reflections can adequately resolve. In the interim period, while the case develops, public interest remains high, with potential future court appearances, bail hearings, additional charges, witness testimonies, or negotiated plea developments all capable of reshaping the dominant narrative yet again in significant ways. This high-profile incident also prompts necessary wider discussions around concepts of personal accountability, the realistic limits of second chances in the justice system and public eye, and the ethical responsibilities that media platforms bear when they actively platform and profit from street-adjacent figures whose backgrounds include serious criminal histories. Supporters of Hefe and others with similar trajectories often point to deeper systemic issues, such as cycles of poverty, inadequate opportunities, over-policing, and intergenerational trauma in communities like South Central, as important context that demands nuance, empathy, and structural solutions rather than blanket condemnation or simplistic moral judgments. Skeptics and critics within the culture, on the other hand, interpret the situation as further evidence that certain ties to the streets, once deeply formed, can prove extraordinarily difficult or even impossible to sever completely, particularly when increased public visibility brings heightened scrutiny, jealousy, or renewed pressure from old networks. For the no-jumper platform specifically, this scandal represents a significant test of long-term resilience and adaptability, as the brand has successfully navigated previous controversies involving various hosts and guests, but none quite as severe, legally weighty, or personally close to the core operation as this one. Public commentary sampled from forums, X threads, YouTube reactions, and Instagram discussions reveals deeply divided reactions ranging from expressions of genuine sadness and lost faith in a figure many saw as inspirational, to harsher criticisms of the broader glorification of street narratives that can backfire spectacularly when reality intervenes. As more verified information potentially emerges in the coming weeks and months about the alleged victim's background and story, the precise sequence of events, and the full extent of any role attributed to Hefe. The complete emotional, legal, and cultural weight of the situation will likely become clearer and more multifaceted. In summarizing the current state of this rapidly developing affair, Morris Shellman, known professional as Aunt Hefe or Aunt Jeffe, currently sits in custody, facing profound personal, professional, and legal uncertainty that will likely define the next several years of his life, regardless of the ultimate outcome. From his early and intense immersion in the harsh realities of South Central street life, through the experience of federal imprisonment on serious charges and a subsequent media resurgence that was actively facilitated and supported by Adam22, to this abrupt and dramatic collision with the California justice system on a felony murder case. His personal journey encapsulates in dramatic fashion the volatile, high-stakes intersection of contemporary hip-hop culture, deeply rooted personal histories, public image management, and uncompromising legal accountability. Adam22's particular handling of the press, statements, and on-air reactions has introduced yet another compelling dimension to the saga, igniting passionate debates about themes of loyalty versus self-protection, the boundaries of commentary, and the sometimes blurry line between transparency and implication that can carry unintended consequences. The cryptic pre-arrest video continues to linger in the public consciousness as a powerful symbol of foreboding awareness, internal struggle, and possible resignation. While the unusually high million-dollar bail figure and the ongoing strategic silence from LAPD regarding many specifics continue to keep audiences engaged, speculating, and emotionally invested. This is far from a neatly resolved tale with clear heroes or villains. Rather, it stands as a complicated, evolving drama filled with implications that extend to everyone touched by it, from the accused individual now tasked with mounting a credible defense and preserving whatever remains of his reputation, to the media platform forced to adapt quickly to the sudden loss of a key on-air voice and associated content, and the broader fan community left processing the uncomfortable gap between the inspiring redemption story they had embraced and the far more complex, unresolved realities now being revealed through legal channels. The weeks and months ahead will almost certainly bring additional revelations, official court filings, witness developments, media interviews, and in-depth analyses that further deepen our collective understanding of exactly how quickly promising personal and professional trajectories can shift dramatically when unresolved elements from the past finally demand full attention and payment. Ultimately, the entire situation underscores a timeless and often painful truth that continues to play out in these environments. The streets may occasionally offer what seem like viable paths toward escape and reinvention, but they rarely forget or fully release those who once walked them intimately. And the consequences of maintaining even residual connections can manifest suddenly and irreversibly when least expected, altering the course of lives, careers, and public narratives in ways that no amount of podcast discussion or social media posting can adequately prepare for or undo. The ongoing conversations surrounding authentic transformation, the true costs of visibility and authenticity in hip-hop media, the responsibilities of platforms, and the enduring power of early life experiences will undoubtedly continue resonating long after the initial shock of this particular chapter begins to fade into the broader archive of industry stories and lessons learned.